25th, 2025 Finance and Operations Committee Board of Education meeting. We are calling this meeting to order at 5:01 PM. Can you please call the roll? I will call the roll. Mrs. Arvanites.
Here.
Mrs. Troutman here. Mrs. Assaf.
Here.
Mr. Bresnahan.
Here.
Mrs. Hostler.
Here.
Mrs. Lewinsky.
Here.
And Dr. Henry.
Here.
We have 7 board members present, 0 absence. Let's stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Yeah, no public comment. All right, so it looks like no public comments here. I did want to just take a minute to welcome our new finance and what's the name of this committee?
Finance and Operations.
Operations Committee committee members. As the community knows, an outreach was put out to the whole community, and 3 were selected for this committee. And I'm super grateful to introduce Kelly Letizia and Gary Riani and Peter Foran. I thought he was going to be here, but maybe he'll come in. Those are our 3 committee members. I reached out to them, and I'm just going to basically say the same thing I said to you guys. I can't tell you how appreciative we are that you're taking time to be here and lend your expertise and experiences to this committee. Volunteering in this district is a valued, very valued thing, and we appreciate your willingness to take time away from your family. So thank you all very much. It's going to be a good year. Okay, with that being said, we will move on to approving the Finance and Operations Committee meeting minutes of March 9th, 2025. Are there any changes to the minutes as they stand? Hearing none, those minutes are approved. Moving on to next item is the summer capital project update. And I believe, the man with
Thank you. I'm
no
gonna turn
name
it over to
tag.
Brent.
Yeah, he's getting a name tag.
Hello, I'm Brent Brasky, Director of Facilities. Thank you for this. So first, we want to give you a bit of a referendum update. Our ribbon cutting for Madison School is going to be August 12th from 4 to 5. We're hoping to see everyone there, to see what's happening, to see the new building, see everything ready for the beginning of the school year. So our summer 2025 capital plan. So our first project we had was York High School parking lot repavement. We were able to get that done under budget and on time. So this is a picture of the completed lot, and many people parked in it today. So our next was our Churchville Middle School. Our Churchville Middle School drop-off is complete. It was within budget. We did have some expenses there for some drainage, but it was within budget, and it is completed on time, ready for the schools to use it starting next week. Our big ones was the York High School vestibules. And so we have these 2. We were working on the student entrance and the teacher entrance, or parents entrance 1 and 3. This is the main entrance. It removed the desk from the hallway, moved it into a secure space in the back. And this is the entrance that when parents have to come to school or drop anything off, this is the entrance that they use. Then we have our entrance number 3, which is the student entrance. We moved the vestibule back. We created an office space to move the employees out of just the normal walkway for students to check in. When students check into the building, they use 1, 3, and 33 up until 7:30 a.m. Between 7:40 and 3:06, if a student comes or leaves the building, they have to come through this entrance to get back into the school. We did an upgrade to the Emerson replacement of their playground, and so we have that complete. The smaller picture on the left is the front playground where they removed some pieces from the back and moved them forward. And then the larger picture on the right is all of the new back area playground, which we are making the main focus for safety and security for our students. York High School is getting 20 new cafeteria tables due to delivery and logistics and building. They will not be delivered until mid-September. We have the old tables that we're still going to use, and when they come in, the staff will move those right into place. We also had on schedule Jefferson Elementary and Edison Elementary, the replacement of their rooftop units for the multipurpose area. That was a bid project. It went out for bid. We accepted Hartwig Mechanical to do the work, and those are scheduled for a mid-September install. One of the last items was the painting of the Sandberg cafeteria. So we went ahead and we have completed that project. They repainted the columns red. Leadership there wanted the rest of the walls white, so we matched that. As we were doing that, we also took the time to repaint the kitchen that needed an upgrade and then that servery line. So that was all complete. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Well, you started strong with our favorite two words, under budget and on time.
Yes.
I mean, like, just, if you start with that, every time you're here, we're going to be happy.
Okay.
I'm going to open it up to questions and comments.
Not a question, I just wanted to highlight, going back to the Emerson, I just wanted to highlight that for our community because that's been a project in waiting for a couple of years. And I'm thrilled to see that we have finally installed a playground that is used by kids, but not only that, that is equal and equitable to all of our elementary schools. And so thank you for your work in installing that one. The other was with the secure vestibules. That's where I have a question. I know we've been on a couple-year plan on when we've been focusing on school safety and security and implementing secured vestibules across the district. Is my memory correct in that this is the last secure vestibule to be installed for that plan?
This is the last one to be installed.
Great.
They're all complete.
So now we can say all of our buildings, including Madison and our transition center, have a double or secured vestibule access
Correct.
for every school. Okay,
Yes.
great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I just noticed the other day, I feel like every summer this happens, but there was some road work being done in front of Sandberg for middle school, that the city, I assume, is doing.
That is city work. They are repairing some gutters and repairing the roadway surface.
Do we know if that's going to be done by the time
According
school
to
starts?
my contacts at the city, that will be done for the first day of school. They're scheduled to be finished on the 11th.
Oh,
So
good.
when
Great.
staff goes back on the 12th and students show up on the 13th, that is all supposed to be completed.
Thank you.
I was worried about that Elm Park behind the school, too. That seems to be under construction the whole summer.
It has been. They have finished
Yep,
paving
I
Elm Park.
just saw the paving this morning.
There's a very few things to be completed, and the city also believes they will be done by the 11th.
Great.
Good, thank you.
I just want to echo what Athena said about Emerson Elementary. Not only is the playground great and definitely more equitable across schools, being a PTA member there for years, but it also improves the safety of the front playground, which I know a number of kids were getting hurt on, and it's been a top issue for the parents there for a long time. So I know they will be ecstatic, and I've already seen chatter in the parental group me's.
Okay, good to hear.
They're excited.
Anyone else? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
When you get a name tag, that means you have to present every meeting. You know that. He doesn't have a. Okay. Next up is the life safety survey. Oh,
And
I'm like,
I'm going to be leading this conversation, but Brent is going to be on standby because a lot of this does have to do with facilities. And I'm going to use this opportunity as an educational piece, both for our community members here, as well as our board and the community as a whole, to inform about upcoming agenda items that are coming to the board. And this is a very important process that takes place every 10 years in every school district in the state of Illinois. And what this is intended for is, in 1953, there was a fire that took place in Our Lady of the Angels, I believe, school in Chicago. And they discovered as a result of that, that there were some life safety elements that were not in place from that school. And unfortunately, a lot of children died in that incident. And so they embarked on a plan to make sure that all of our schools in the state of Illinois have life safety elements that are taken into account in order to prevent such a disaster from going on in any of our schools in the state. So every 10 years, we go through a process, and I'm going to walk you through those steps and kind of show you where we're at in that process, because we have some upcoming activities that we're going to be, that we have to affirm in order to move forward on our life safety survey. Step one is that we have to secure what's called a design professional, and our design professional is our architect, White Architects, and they go around to all the buildings, and they identify those violations that happen in our schools. Now, violations sounds really bad, but violations is simply saying we need to update our schools in order to be in alignment with these health, life, safety codes that are designed by the state. So White Architects did do that. They walked through the buildings, and you can't see this item by item, but this is exactly the code that they're looking at. They're looking at the roofs, they're looking at our air handling units, they're looking at our classroom doors, they're looking at egress, they're looking at our hallways and making sure that there's enough space. There are so many things on this list. It is available to see on the Illinois State Board of Education website, so that you can see all of those items that they're looking through. It is a very comprehensive system that they are checking off every classroom, every hallway, every crevice of every school to make sure that we are in alignment with the health, life, safety code. So then we move on to step two of the life safety process, and that's when we have a chance to review all of those items, and they've categorized it into three areas. One is those that are extremely urgent, that have to be taken care of within the next year. Then there's some that are required, and then there's a third set that are more recommendations that don't pose a risk to our students, but do provide some elements of safety, security, and overall well-being of the school. We also, at that time, and this is the period of time that we are in right now, we also have to identify what existing funds that we have in order to provide these updates to our facilities, which will be talked about in our upcoming presentation on the financial update. This document here is a summary of those life safety items that have been listed through those walkthroughs with White Architects. You can see at the very bottom, it has a summary of the amount of work that is listed for this. Again, I'll mention that it's a 10-year life safety plan. So when you add it up, it is approximately $40 million. But again, this is a 10-year life safety plan. We do not have to provide $40 million of renovations next summer. Thankfully, Mr. Brasky is thankful that we wouldn't have to do this all in one single year. From there, we move on to step three, where the design professional enters that into the database that's provided by the State Board of Education. And especially the most important ones are the ones that have to be taken care of within 12 months. And that moves us on into that you, as the school board, actually approves all of those items that have been put forth. That is going to take place on August 19th. We are going to provide you the entire list of all of those items. And it can be dizzying, but at the same time, when you start reading through what some of these are, and I'm going to have some examples in just a bit of what you're going to see. Some are very minor and some are more significant upgrades. We provide, once it's affirmed by this board, we provide it to the regional superintendent who reviews it and determines some of these items may be taken off. They may determine that these are not life safety issues, and so therefore they won't be part of the report. From there, then it goes on to the state superintendent or designee, who then reviews everything that the regional superintendent does. And finally authorizes the ability for the district to move forward with these life safety improvements, as well as authorizes whatever funds that we've identified in order to accomplish this work. Believe it or not, there are more steps, but this is more in the implementation phase. So once it is approved by the state, then we begin the work, and we work with White to make sure that we secure all the necessary the bids and the work to be done, especially those that have to be taken care of within the first 12 months. And then once we've ensured that all of it has been completed, White oversees that work, similar to our referendum project. They oversee the work, and once it's all complete, then we take the necessary steps to report to the state board that that work has been completed. Especially, again, those level A, those category A elements that have to be taken care of are of utmost priority to the district. So I mentioned category A. You can see that right there. Within 12 months of the approval by this board, we have to take care of those projects. Category B still must be done, but we are given 5 years in which to accomplish those projects. Category C, we cannot complete those until A's and B's have all been done, because they don't pose that life safety risk. A little fun fact, it means we don't even necessarily have to do those category C items. These are recommendations by White that we take care of. We do look at all of those category C items, and we do feel that these are really important. We want to uphold the highest levels of health, life, and safety for our students. So I talked about some examples that I would provide to you, and I went from the smallest amount to one of the largest amounts that is in these reports. I'm not going to share what schools for the ESB, because there's a large number of them, and the prices are a little different. So it goes from as small as simply a water inspection date, whether that has been inspected and just hadn't been updated, or whether it needs inspection that was identified in the health life safety report. So we're going to address that. And it goes as high, you can see that the chiller is in the $1 million plus range. And some of those are life safety elements, because we want to make sure our air quality for our students meet satisfactory levels. Roofs are included in this. Windows are considered part of this. Windows would be in that category C, because the windows that we use don't pose a safety risk for our students, but it does provide the opportunity to make sure that our buildings are well equipped, resistant to the sun, resistant to weather elements. And that's why it's listed in the report. This is an overall summary of the dollar amounts that are associated with everything that White has submitted to the state for approval as part of the life safety project. You'll notice that I did also include the category A items. If you total those up, it is about $300,000 of category A items that must be taken care of within the next 12 months. You'll notice that some buildings have very little cost in their overall life safety program, but you'll notice a trend. Madison, Field, and Lincoln are our brand new buildings. That is an advantage for what the community has invested in. We've provided these new buildings, and it has allowed us to have less life safety concerns in those buildings, so that $40 million isn't more because of the investments that this community has made on our buildings.
Great, thank you. All right, questions?
Hi, thank you. Do any of these projects fall within our regular summer capital projects, like something we will already be doing and budgeted for, and, timeline and all that?
That is a great question. So as we start embarking on how we are going to fund this, that is going to be something that we talk about in our next upcoming financial presentation. But at the same time, yes, we can use some of our capital projects funds to pay for some of this. Again, $40 million over 10 years, that's $4 million a year, which would be our entire capital projects fund. But yes, certainly we can and have for some of these elements. We have done some air handling units, as we saw from this summer's projects, and it was not associated with the life safety survey. I will say that all of these life safety survey elements, we cannot begin work on it until the state superintendent, even if we said we want to get a head start on it, once they're identified in this health life safety survey, we have to wait until it's gone through the right authorization so that they can make sure that the funds line up exactly with the work items.
I have two questions, sorry. Can you go back to that last slide? I noticed Madison's on there twice. Can we talk a little bit about
Yes,
that?
I'm sorry, that first one, that is an input error. That should be actually Conrad Fisher.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, and so just in summary, I'm hoping I'm able to summarize this process so that I can make it more clear for myself and maybe others too. So what I like about this, what I'm gathering, is that we're establishing almost a 10-year facility plan for, it could be smaller ticket items as suggestions by our architects, but some very much larger ticket items in the operations world, things like boilers, chillers, things that we have seen in our CapEx, $4 million budgeted every year for summer capital projects, but am I right to say that this seems like it's in addition to what we've been planning for, I think, or maybe it's just more transparent through the health life safety process?
Right, yes. So many of these items, as you mentioned, have been on previous capital plans. This formalizes it into we do need to replace them. It is not an optional thing under this report. And it reinforces our plan to make sure that all of these facilities and the equipment that comes with it is in right order. And I do want to add a side note for those little ones. You mentioned the little ones. Those little ones, we can use the capital project funds that we do the transfers for. We can also use our normal maintenance, our operations and maintenance fund, especially for those small ones. So that water main inspection would be a good one to just use our operations and maintenance fund so that we can focus on those larger items that are in the 5-year capital plan. At the same time, it's important to realize that these are only life safety items. So there are other items that we've identified in our 5-year capital plan that go beyond just life and safety, that we want to make sure that our programs are high quality, and part of that is making sure that our equipment is up to date, that our buildings are up to date, that we can capture some efficiencies through lighting, through flooring, through energy savings opportunities. All of those things are considerations that we always bring forth to our 5-year capital plan that are separate from this life safety.
Yeah, I'm glad you highlighted that because I was going to bring that up. There are other things that I would kind of put in the bucket, generally speaking, of upgrades, right? That might be remodeling or updating that are not necessarily bricks and mortar and boilers and chillers and windows and things like that. And that, this is a separate kind of need that's identified and planned for in addition to, because we have to remember how I say this often, large our district is and how much real estate we actually own, but then how much it costs to maintain, right, to be able to get the largest lifespan possible out of our bricks and mortar. And this is one way or one piece of that whole puzzle, I'll say that. And am I clear in this understanding, and this is something positive, I think, of this process, we submit a plan of action, right? This is what we would be planning to the State Board of Education. They take a look at it and approve it. but we also have to submit a financial plan of how we're going to fund it to the State Board of Education for approval, right?
Correct.
Because I'd imagine districts just, this is a very challenging financial puzzle to figure out, especially given the length of the term of it. 10 years is a long time. Things can change at any given moment, as we learned in the last 10 years. So we put forward the plan, and then we put forward a recommendation of how we're going to finance it. And the state will then determine whether or not we can finance it, given our plan that we put forward.
Correct. They ask us how much money do we have, for instance, in our capital projects plan, in our capital projects fund currently to support this work. Well, we make a $4 million transfer every year and we perform that work. So generally, the amount that we have remaining at the end of every summer is very low in that capital projects fund. In the same way, operations and maintenance, they identify how much of the money that is in that fund can be available for these types of work items. And beyond that, very few school districts have enough money in those two buckets to fund their entire life safety survey. So that's where the state superintendent and the regional superintendent analyze that and give us the authorization of saying, yes, you'll use those funds, and we authorize you to seek other opportunities for funds.
Great.
Remember, you have 10 years to do it, so we can accrue, we can invest some of our $4 million every year, even if we don't have it right now. We can identify that as one of the sources of funds in order to complete these projects over the next 10 years.
Okay, thank you.
I know some of these are state mandated safety concerns. Does the state give any funding specifically for any of this?
The state does have some grants available. Oftentimes, they are awarded on a needs basis, which is often associated with your tier status in evidence-based funding. So we are a tier 4 district, which means we are kind of lowest on the priority list in terms of receiving any state money from that.
Thank you. And you said the A grouping is about $300,000 worth of repairs?
Correct.
And what would be, do you have a number for what stage B or category B would be?
I do have that, but due to some technical difficulties,
Okay.
it's on my computer, which is currently displaying our presentation. If I can get you the firm number, it's about $6 million.
Okay, so roughly $6.5 million over the next 5 years need to be
Must be.
directed for these specific things.
Correct. Yeah, category A and B, all of those items must be accomplished within the next 5 years. So you are correct, about $6.5 million over the next 5 years
Right.
are the have-tos within the life safety report.
So then we have a good amount of nice to-dos and about $33 million worth that they suggested. Is that roughly the
I think that's a
number?
good estimate, yes.
And do we have are you going to try to sort of chunk them, divide them up over the 10 years, try to do about 4 million-ish per year?
I don't think you can. You have to do A and B
Yes, I'm going to
first.
backtrack.
Oh, yeah,
This
that's
kind
right,
of
that's right, yeah.
outlines, we do have years in terms of what we would recommend these projects when we would recommend these projects be taken care of. And you can see priority 1 is essentially those A's and B's. And then those, I think the priority ones on the right side are inaccurate because those would be priority 2s.
So we can't do any of the third C categories at all until the first 2 are completed?
I'm looking over to my colleague, Mr. Dada.
Right, if it's 1 and 2, that would be the highest one, and you have to take care of that first.
Okay.
Unless the 3 becomes 2 or 1.
I'd imagine some of their analysis would have to do with the lifespan also of current facilities. So something might be in the category 3 because it has 5 to 10 more years of life in it.
You are
That's-
absolutely correct. In
thanks.
fact, one of the items that you'll see when you have the detailed report, and that will be posted as well for everyone to see, is that, for instance, one of the roofs, it says that the roof is past its warranty. Past its useful life, that's something else that we would look at and say, if it's showing signs that it is near that point where we're going to experience leaks or we're going to experience some detrimental impacts on the interior of the school, then it might be upgraded at that time. The county ROE does yearly inspections and will also note when something has kind of changed on its status. So that might elevate something that might be on that category C. It might be elevated as an amendment to our life safety survey.
I just have a couple more. How long does it take to get from step 1 to step 7 when we, get that approval that we have to start doing the work?
Generally, I'll start from the time that you affirm until we get approval by the state superintendent. I would estimate it somewhere between that 1 to 2 month range. It has been taking a little bit longer recently. I think there's less staff to assist in the process. But it is very important for them to expedite that because they realize that once you affirm, you only have 12 months to complete the work, which means we have to secure that work, potentially bid that work, and get all of that in line so that we can be doing it next summer.
So I think you clarified that second 5 years, that's not all priority ones, because I was very stressed that there was only one priority 2 on this entire chart. But so you're thinking those ones on the right are priority 2s?
Correct.
Okay. And then on August 19th, when you present us with the survey results from White, are you asking us to approve the budget for priority 1 at that time?
We are not asking you to approve any sort of budget for these life safety projects. That would come after the state superintendent has reviewed, approved, and has provided us the green light to find those funding opportunities, and then we can discuss how are those being funded.
And then do we go back every year and say, this is how we're funding our next round? Or, do we have to give them a 10-year picture, 3 months in when we're ready to start the process?
Well, once they give us the green light to find those funding opportunities, we don't have an obligation to report back how we're funding it.
Okay.
We only have an obligation to report back when the work has been completed.
Okay. But yet they look at the funding in the beginning,
Yes.
year 1.
Because they need to be able to say, yes, all of this work is life safety work, so we expect you to do it, and so we authorize you to seek out those funds.
Got it. So they're not confirming what we have or how we're getting it. They're just giving us permission to go out and get it if we need it.
Correct.
Got it. When did White complete this survey? Was it 2024?
It was, I believe, August of 2024.
And did they complete it 10 years ago for us?
If not them, it is
Somebody.
required every 10 years.
Okay. And so is it fair to assume that our kind of summer capital projects have been incorporating the last 10-year report with things that maybe are in the C list, I'm assuming, since we're, 10 years out?
It appears that is what has been happening, and I do think some of it was taken care of in some referendums with the schools we've taken care of.
Right.
But it had appeared that that's how they'd been taking care of their last 10-year report.
I guess I'm just in my mind trying to wonder, from the last 10-year report, are there any Cs that are still out there lingering that haven't been addressed that somehow now have become Bs and As? That's all. Right, so
Yes.
that's why I'm like, how much of this stuff, when we get this big picture report or survey, actually gets completed in the 10 years? Because if we had time in the last 10-year cycle to get some of those C stuff done, and we just chose not to, and now they're Bs and As, now the pressure's kind of on, like, we got to get it done. So I'm just curious about how many of those Cs transition to bigger problems for us now.
that,
Go ahead, no.
That was going to be my next question and kind of piggybacks on what you're saying. So, but I thought we couldn't do C projects until the
Right.
A and B are done. So are we allowed to do, like, say it's something we already want to do, it's just on our personal D205 list. Are we able to do that if it's happens to be on the C list without doing the B and the A first?
Oh, but I'm talking about the last 10-year report.
Yeah, but I'm saying like if it didn't, we wouldn't have been able to do Cs if they
Well,
were.
we finished the As and Bs from 10 years ago.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Right, so
Yeah.
I'm assuming the last 5 years, because we have 5 years to do As and Bs, right? Or, all of them. The last 5 years, we should have just been working on Cs. At least I'm dumbing it down to that. And I'm really good at dumbing down things, so correct me if I'm wrong, please.
I think you bring up an interesting point. We can certainly pull up the previous life safety survey, and we can provide that. Sometimes even the language changes just a little bit on what the water main inspection might be called something else. So you can't do a search for a match, but you could certainly look at those C items and say, are any of those on this report? That must mean that they weren't taken care of in that second set of 5 years.
Because I will just say, I wasn't here 10 years ago. But I feel like, and I won't be here 10 years from now. I will not. So if I was a board member 10 years from now, I would certainly want the Cs to be part of our summer capital project issues, knowing that they could become bigger issues and cost us more in the long run. So that's what I will just throw out there for whoever will be here 10 years from now. Looking at you.
Yeah. I think also, if I could throw this out there, because I'm feeling the same way, like I'm not very familiar and I'm in my 5th year, right? And we have a lot of new faces around the district and our table. Is this something then, now, moving forward, because I'm taking this as a snapshot of where we are right now, facility operation, maintenance-wise, and we're looking forward to what we need in the future, there's a process in place where there's an annual review of where we are in this plan, once it's approved, and I'm wondering if that we can incorporate that type of reporting to the board, so that we have it at least on an annual basis, so that we have then record of it and understand as new members come on, as new administrators come on, how we're moving forward in that work. And remember, this is ever-changing, right? It's a work in progress. Something that's a C last 10 years might very well be an A right now, because maybe we didn't have the funding or our priorities were focused somewhere else. I can't answer those questions because I wasn't in this room, but at that time, but we can develop moving forward some systemic communication and notification, sharing of information so that it's there.
And I think it should come simultaneously with that, when do we get the summer capital list? February, March, somewhere, what the presentation on what you're going to do every summer. I feel like that would be the appropriate time to kind of give us the updates on these.
We have given that in March in the
Yeah.
past, so we can add it into that.
Great. Right? Don't you think that's kind of the
Yeah,
appropriate time?
yeah, I mean, I don't know enough about the cycle of health, life, safety when the county comes in and does their inspection, but something that marries it so that we could see the bigger picture of CapEx plus health, life, safety, plus long-range facility plan, plus upgrade and remodel plan. This is a very complex topic. Mohsen.
If I can put a little context in terms of tracking life safety, what really happened is in 1994.
Mohsen, I'm sorry, we need your microphone.
Thank you.
So in 1994, when the tax caps were implemented, before the tax cap, life safety was a separate unlimited levy for life safety. When life safety became part of the tax caps, there were no additional funds allocated. So most business officials felt putting a life safety account separately created more hindrance, because every time you had to do it, you had to go to the state, get approval, and fix things. So we folded that in Fund 20 under operations and maintenance. Now that the state has approved a separate funding through bonds without a referendum, what has happened is they want to make sure that you account for all of those dollars, and we will once again use life safety fund balance. So whenever there's an expenditure in life safety fund balance, we can track, we can go back 5-10 years, look at our system, and identify how much was spent for what purpose. So now you will be able to strictly go because it's coded that way. And we found it more beneficial to code it under operation and maintenance, because anytime you fix something, you go to the regional office, they get an approval, you go to the state, and they were not giving dollars at that time. Now we have a separate pocket. It's still local taxpayers' money, but there is protection for the taxpayer that you have to identify and only do those projects with those dollars.
It makes sense. It's made it a little bit, I don't want to say easier, but the pathway forward, given projects and the timelines and the demands and the bid process and all of that, when you have to create extra steps, I could see how districts went through a different fund, quote-unquote fund, rather than the health, life, safety. But it sounds like that landscape has changed now by the state, allowing more opportunity for districts. And that's why we are where kind of we are and what we're talking about today.
Right.
Thank you.
Can I ask one
Yeah,
more
of
question?
course.
I don't want to overwhelm with just this topic, so, and you might not know the answer to this question, but on the last slide where you went and talked about the different buildings, I noticed that while the 3 new buildings were on the list at their same amount, the $72,000, and I'm obviously, based on the next slide, those are all category C. And I think it would just be helpful, maybe as an example, because clearly these are all brand-new buildings, is what is that 72,000? Do you know what it's for? Because I'm wondering if it's just a maintenance thing that needs to be replaced within 10 years.
No, that's a
That would be
really,
helpful.
that's a really good question. So these items for these 3 schools actually exist in some of the other schools too, because it is a security element that is not essential. So what we're talking about for this 72,000 is security film for the windows.
Does every building have that included in their total cost?
I'd have to go back and double check. I know I've seen it in some of the other buildings as well. So I believe if they don't already have the security film, that
Okay,
they would
great.
most likely be included as well.
Great. All right.
It does seem natural in the 5-year and 10-year plans we've received in the past. A lot of our replacements of roofs and boilers and such are based on their lifespan, turf, whatever it may be. So it only makes sense to me that some of those C items would move into a B or an A because they're getting closer to their, outliving their usefulness. So I guess it just only makes sense that some of those C items would naturally move up in priority. So it seems like that's what a lot of those, the second side, items are just getting closer to needing replacement. So
I agree with that.
Anything else? Okay, moving on to C, financial update.
So the reason why we had that agenda item before this is because part of this is identifying where we are with our district funds, so that we might be able to identify, if possible, if there are funds currently available within our fund balance. It's really important that on a yearly basis, we kind of take a look at our overall financial health of the district so that we can address that through the budget, which is coming up soon, and we can also address that through our forecasting that'll happen later on this year, our tax levy that we issue at the end of the calendar year, and then as we make decisions in terms of future planning for future school years. We have been through a tremendous period of time where we have created really high quality, not just facilities through the referendum, but really high quality programs. And so the theme of this presentation is all about not just creating, but sustaining. We want to make sure that everything that we've built over the years is sustainable because we see it working for our students, we see it working for our staff. At the same time, we need to create and sustain healthy financial structures in order to make sure sustainability costs resources. And that's finances, and that's also people resources. And we want to make sure that we keep that front of mind as we talk about the current financial state of this district. So today's presentation on our finance update is going to look back at the last 5 years, then look back on how we did just this past year. The auditors have not come in to do their audit, but we wanted to give you a sneak peek. We believe it's going to be pretty close to what we have on our books. We also want to look at a snapshot right now of where our district finances are, and that would be called our fund balance, as well as a little bit of conversation about our budget that's going to be presented on August 19th. Finally, we're going to move into that phase where we talk about those life safety projects and how that folds into our current financial state and our future financial state. This centers around our district-wide priorities and objectives, specifically in the area of our financial and operational effectiveness. This addresses all of the bullet points that you can see that are listed in our strategic plan under financial and operational effectiveness. So I hope you see that embedded throughout this presentation. I do want to go over some terms in case you are not familiar with public school financing, because it does work a little different from a lot of private industries, so you might not be familiar with some of these terms, or you may be very well familiar with this. Fund balance is essentially what we have in the bank at any given time, and it's provided in terms of investments, cash in bank, and available funds that exist in small amounts, like our activity accounts and our insurance fund. That's all part of our fund balance. Our budget is just a one-year projection on our revenues and expenditures. That is adopted by the board every September, and it's presented every summer in advance of the adoption of that budget. Operating funds take most of our total expenditures happen from the operating funds. This is the funds that it takes to manage the day-to-day activities of the district. To educate our students, that's the education fund. Operations and maintenance fund provides the facilities and repairs the facilities so that we can remain operational. The transportation fund ensures that our students get to school on time and are ready for learning. Our Social Security and IMRF fund provides the benefits that are required for our staff, and our working cash fund provides an opportunity for us to set aside money so that we have funds when we reach the low points of the school year. And finally, I'm not going to delve too much into life safety report because we already spent a large amount of time talking about that. So first, let's talk about our 5-year look back, our historical overview. And it's really important to first start by celebrating. There we go. I really want to celebrate that creating aspect of our creating and sustaining. And we are just about finished with a remarkable creation opportunity that this board embarked on about 7 years ago. And it couldn't have happened without the support of so many stakeholders. So we want to acknowledge the generous support that this community gave by voting to approve this referendum and providing that $168 million to improve and in some cases to completely replace some of our school buildings. We also want to thank this board for their support in supporting additional scope items that came along with this referendum, with these building projects, to make sure that the facilities that we were going to see on the back end were really what the community and what this board really wanted to see in it. And finally, we want to thank all the staff and all the third-party contractors that had a hand in renovating and rebuilding these magnificent facilities in this district. So, as I mentioned before, this board made some intentional investments through this referendum process and on an ongoing basis. So I want to emphasize that this has been an intentional investment of our fund balance over the last 5 years. You can see that, as I mentioned before, $21 million from our fund balance was used to expand the scope of some of our building projects. In addition, every year, we build into the budget here in District 205, $4 million towards the Capital Projects Fund to maintain our facilities. That means maintaining these brand-new facilities as well as addressing some of those needs that weren't addressed in the referendum projects. In addition to that, we do provide funding on capital leases, mostly around technology. Our technology needs are ever-changing, and so it's really important not to purchase once and sit on it for 10 years because those devices are obsolete long before a 10-year cycle would happen. So providing those capital leases is an important aspect of making sure that the students have the devices that they need. And finally, I want to point out, this is separate from the investments into our school buildings, but at the same time, this board made a conscious effort to partner with the community and in appreciation of their contributions to this referendum, this board did give some money back to the community in the amount of $4.7 million. So that is to be celebrated as well. That shows the fiscal responsibility that this board has had in not only implementing this massive project, but also being financially responsible along the way. So I wanted to make sure to point that out because some of these numbers might look a little frightening, but given the right context, it was intentional and it was within the limits, within the fund balance that we have here in the district. This chart shows you an overview of the revenues and expenditures, as well as transfers that took place from one year to the next. And then I'll highlight all the way to the right side, the total change in financial position each of the last 5 years. You'll notice that there's parentheses around 4 out of the 5 of them. That is the investment that we made towards the referendum and towards those ongoing capital projects over the years. Our fund balance was extremely healthy heading into this, and knowing that we could utilize some of that fund balance to support this work was something that this board intentionally embarked upon. Using that data, that brings us to what was our fund balance at the end of every year. I want to make sure to point out that you'll see asterisks next to 4 out of those years. What you see on the right side is the fund balance that includes May and June property taxes in all of these years. So you could really see where the fund balance was, including those May and June property tax payments. For those 4 years, this board made an intentional choice to defer those May and June property taxes into the next fiscal year. So that's why that's why those are asterisks next to that, because what's reported to the state does not include those deferred property tax revenues that we received. So this is the money that was in the bank at the end of June, including those funds that we deferred until July 1st. As you can see, we started off in 2019. The beginning fund balance was $66 million. And over the course of time, with those intentional expenditures, by the end of not this past fiscal year, but the year before that, it was down to $53 million. Again, all about those investments into the facilities here in District 205. I know you probably have a lot of questions swirling, but I think some of those will be answered along the process. So I encourage you to write them down, and maybe there will be some more clarity, but but we would encourage as many questions as possible because it's really important to have a clear understanding of where we're at financially. So let's talk about how this past year has gone. It concluded on June 30th. Again, the auditors have not been in to examine our finances and to ensure that our numbers are accurate. We are very confident that these are generally accurate numbers. So I wanted to first highlight the fact that compared to our budget that was adopted last September, this district had some savings on the overall budget. We received almost $3 million in revenue over what we had budgeted. Most of that is through interest income and some additional federal funds, basically because of the timing of some of those federal funds. But I really want to highlight the fact that our overall operating expenditures were $2 million less than what we budgeted. The staff here in District 205 are very conscious of making sure every dollar is spent wisely, and this goes to show that we are not spending just to get to that expenditure limit. We are spending intentionally, and we are making sure that it goes towards those that impact our students the most. So, with that $5 million savings on the budget, you might think, wow, we just added a whole bunch to our fund balance. But it's important to point out that last September, we intentionally budgeted for a $12.2 million deficit. Part of that $12.2 million deficit is the third of three $7 million investments towards the additional scope of the referendum. So keep that in mind, that $7 million, more than half of that budgeted deficit was a one-time expense that does not exist after this past fiscal year. In addition to that, there were other investments that we intentionally invest into this school district that were part of that budgeted deficit. Again, I mentioned that $4 million transfer into capital projects. We do that every year, and that is an intentional investment from our fund balance. In addition, those capital leases that we talked about regarding our technology needs, that is an ongoing need. Those leases, as they come off, we invest in more technology and we continue those capital leases. I do want to point out that while that first one was the last of three, the other two are ongoing expenses that we have intentionally spent from our fund balance, but we also have to keep that in mind as we embark on future budgets. So as I mentioned, we saved about $5 million from budget, and you can see this side by side by fund. Again, operating funds takes out debt service and capital projects because those expenses incur, they don't happen on a yearly basis because that is our referendum funds, and those are our ongoing funds that happen in renovating our buildings that might cross over from one fiscal year into the next because most of the projects are happening June, July, and August. You can see on here that the overall actual shows a $7.2 million deficit. But again, with that $7 million investment in that referendum, you're really looking at a $261,000 deficit in our operating funds, which is really close to a break-even point, even though we had originally budgeted a $12.2 million deficit. So that leads us to where are we now based off of what just happened in this past fiscal year. And it's really important to just add another year to that chart that you saw a little earlier. So now you can see with that $5.2 million, that $7.2 million deficit, which included that $7 million spend. It is now down to $46 million of fund balance as of June 30th. I'm going to stress that June 30th because the next slides I'm going to show you, $46 million sounds like a lot of money for this school district to be hanging on to. But that represents June 30th, which is not a representation of what is happening throughout the rest of the school year. This chart shows you the flow of our fund balance. And if I had a laser pointer, I would point to it. But if you don't look at the very top peak, that top peak is happening right around September 1st when we collect our second round of property tax payments. I want you to look at that one that's kind of in the middle, in between the two peaks. That is our June fund balance. That is more representative of what our fund balance is at the end of the fiscal year. However, you'll notice right before that, there is a significant valley. And that valley happens about 1 week before the end of May. And the reason why we've gotten to that valley is our expenditures happen on a regular basis throughout the year. But 86% of our revenue comes from property tax payments, which only happen June 1st and September 1st of every year. So as those expenditures keep incurring and we receive very little revenue during that process, we get to a point about 1 week before the end of May that it's our low point. It's very important to be mindful of that low point because we do not want that low point to dip below the zero line. If it dips below the zero line, most likely that would mean that we would have to create some sort of short-term borrowing situation. Unlike in the private sector, it is a lengthy process and it can be an expensive process. So we do not want to embark on any short-term borrowing whenever possible. So I know it shows it in a chart, but in a graph, but I want to show it to you in terms of the numbers. And we put the dates of the low point from each of the last 6 years to represent what was our fund balance at its lowest point, our estimated fund balance at that point. Again, taking out our very first property tax payment, which we actually get some funds from our June 1st property tax payment. We receive some of them in late May because some people, they don't want to take that chance of coming in on June 1st and for whatever reason their car doesn't start and now they can't pay their property tax bill on time, so they're paying it the week before. That's where we receive the first chunk of property tax money. But this is right before we receive that first round of revenue. And you can see in this past year, our low point is estimated to be at about $4.5 million in a budget that is $162 million for the year. So that is a significant low point. And if we were to present to you a $5.5 million deficit budget this upcoming year, we believe we would not have the fund balance at the end of May in order to avoid short-term borrowing. I will tell you, we are currently still working on the budget, but I am confident we are going to be nowhere near that $5.5 million deficit. So that brings us to the development of the upcoming budget. I'm not going to show you numbers because this is ever changing. Just yesterday, we received from the state figures for the evidence-based funding that the state provides. Because we are a Tier 4 district, we receive very, very little additional money in our general state aid. But it is always good to get finite numbers from the state and work that into the budget before it's presented to all of you. So as we receive more of that data, we're going to put that into our budget because we want it to be as accurate to what we expect the actuals to be as possible. I'm going to go back to that creating and sustaining focus that we talked about at the very beginning of this presentation, and just remind you that as we develop this budget, our priorities are those three things. We want to sustain our fund balance so that we can avoid short-term borrowing that takes money away from investing in the students and puts it into interest payments. We also want to ensure that our programs are sustainable. All the great programs that we've embarked upon over the last several years, we want to make sure that those are continuous and those serve students for years to come. And as we put some closure on the referendum, we want to make sure that these buildings stand the test of time and that they're properly maintained, so we have high-quality facilities at all times. We also have some impacts on the budget that are outside of our control. Obviously, state and federal funding has an impact on this district, not as much as it does on others, but we are at a time where investment from the federal and state level is going through a little bit of contraction. And so we have to be prepared for that, and we are working that into our budgeted revenues. In addition, we haven't seen interest rates drop as significantly as we were anticipating. If you had asked a year ago if we were still going to be around that 4% interest rate range, nobody would have predicted that. But we have to be mindful that there are pressures to bring the interest rates down, and so we anticipate that those interest rates are going to decline. And in the same lines, we know that inflation has had a huge impact on our communities, on our citizens, personally, professionally, and it also has an impact here on our school district. Supplies cost more because of these inflationary pressures. One element I want to highlight today, inflation for energy is up significantly. We anticipate it will be 10 to 20% of an increase in our energy costs this upcoming year. And again, if there's ways, and we are seeking ways to capture opportunities so that if we're not spending as much money on things like energy bills, we can then use that money to invest in our students and our staff. The budget development timeline is taking place over the next month and a half. We are going to be bringing the tentative budget on August 19th for all of you to review, and it will be on display for the community to review as well. This will be a topic of discussion at our next Finance Committee meeting. And finally, we will bring it at the end of September to be adopted by this board and implemented throughout this school year. So now we are going to shift our attention to those sustainability options. We talked about maintaining the programs, maintaining the facilities, and earlier we talked about our life safety survey. And that is an additional pressure on our district finances. So it's important to recap those three major financial pressures that exist. First, that we have had roughly a $5.5 million structural deficit that we want to address through the budget process. We also anticipate about $40 million over the next 10 years in life safety projects that we either have to or would like to address over the next 10 years. And we want to remind everybody that just this past May, our fund balance had gotten down to $4.5 million, which is enough to sustain us, but it is getting close to that point that we have to be very mindful about both our revenues and our expenditures. At this time, I am going to turn it over to Mr. Dada, who is going to talk a little bit about some sustainability options for our finances.
Before I get started, I want to compliment Joe, who has only been here like 5 weeks. And he's done such a fabulous job, very polished presentation, so thank you. My portion is usually to talk about how are we going to address some of our concerns. But before I get into it, I want to re-emphasize what a fabulous school district you have over here in Elmhurst. I've always associated unit districts with efficient school districts, and I've been doing this for more than 40 years. I've worked in school district which was labeled as the most efficient and effective school district in 1995. That was Naperville 203. And then we still were able to make some more efficiency in the budget to make sure we are balanced. So the purpose is, how do we keep our taxpayers happy? Go through a program where we are able to serve all our students, not just selective students, and still be keeping our facilities, operations up to date. And it's a challenge, especially when you have to operate under tax cap legislation. And I'm a big supporter of tax cap legislation, by the way. I'm also financially very conservative, so I can relate to a lot of people when they have questions about taxes. At the same time, being an inside person, I know the dynamics of school funding, and I'm able to address a lot of questions people may have. What happens in a school system is you look at your own child, and if they select a major for teachers and if they select a major for computers, the starting salaries will be very different. Our funding is linked to CPI, and CPI since 1992 and 94, depending on which county, the average is close to about 2.2%. So the best thing you can do is to keep all your costs below 2.2, and you'll never need additional resources. But if you tell your brand new teacher that you're going to be working for 35 years and I'm going to make sure I never give you more than 2.2%, will be sustainable. So you have to always work for ways, how can you make things happen? Then you take a blend of insurance, which is usually a highly desirable for somebody who is just starting. And there has been some legislation where people can still be on their parents' insurance program till age 26. It works for us when we're hiring new teachers, but it also works against us when we have teachers who have their children on it. So our main thing is the blend for salaries and benefit, which is usually in most school districts 75 to 80% of the cost, is there's a lot of pressure. It's going to be more than 2.2% if you were to look at the long run. So schools will always need resources unless there is some big growth where you have a lot of property, new development, like it happens in Oak Brook, which infuses new dollars. In our financial model, we have looked at approximate growth of 1%. So if you were to look at 2.2 and 1%, that's like 3.3%. Then the next pressure is, if we have 75 to 80% growing at 3%, we want to make sure the others are much less so we can use more resources for salaries and benefit. For the last 10 years, purchase services have grown significantly. Purchase services means they're not supplies, they're not equipment, they're like electric, busing contracts, staffing for outsiders where you can't attract people because your salaries are low, but you can hire them through staffing firms which are very expensive. So if you try to go low on salary, you won't be able to put your staff all your position. So our whole objective is to stay sustainable without asking for more resources from the taxpayers. But there are some times where if you have identified a need such as the life safety need, fund balance, how do you do it? And anytime you're asking for more money, it's more money from the taxpayers. And we are close to about 89% locally supported, out of which nearly all of it is taxpayers with the exception of fees. And CPPRT, which is really money coming from the state, but it is classified as local money. CPPRT is corporate personal replacement tax, which used to be local tax before 1974. I wasn't in this business, I'm just giving you the little history. But what happened is the State Department of Revenue took over that responsibility and reallocates based on the pie chart of 1977. So whatever Elmer's share was in 1997 for that thing is given to us. So many communities like Oswego, Naperville, they were mostly farmland in around that time. They don't get the same portion. And some of the schools in the West Cook County, which are industrial like Franklin Park, they get much, much more than large school districts like our school district also. So I'm giving a little background as to why there's a need. It's never mismanagement. And if you look at how you measure efficiently, some people will say, well, the tax rate of Elmhurst is high than Oak Brook. I live in Oak Brook and I run into many friends who are playing. I mean, I can play with random players. Where do you live? Elmhurst. Oh, I live in Oak Brook. Oh, that was a good decision. Your taxes are low. Our school district's tax rate is high. So I have to educate them at the golf course that it's not the efficiency of the school district, how much wealth per student do you have. So if your wealth doubled, if you ask for the same amount of money, your tax rate would go down. So the wealth per student in Oak Brook is much, much higher per student. So they don't need a higher tax rate to generate more money. From my perspective, efficiency is how much do you spend per student and what are the outcomes. And our expenditure of less than 20, I think it's 19,000 and some change, is so relatively much lower than even the elementary. And the reason I'm saying even the elementary is because if you go to high school and if you look at their operating cost, it's in the upper 20s. And if you look at our blend for York, the enrollment York School, and if you were to look at the elementary and do a weighted average thing, we are very, very efficient school district. And I'm saying that from an outsider. I'm not on the payroll, but I've been in this business for a long time, and I'm looking at many school districts, and I'm looking at how efficient. So I was pleasantly impressed. I was very impressed when I was in Naperville, and I'm of an opinion that unit districts are the best for the taxpayers. So when we talk about funding challenges, it's not mismanagement, it's not inefficiency, it's the whole environment of funding. You cannot hire teachers and give them benefits and say you'll never ever go over CPI. That can't happen. Turnover and those things help. So without going through all these bullets over here, if I can look at our answer is, one of the things we want to do is we have to look for multiple ways of staying sustainable. Every organization, we have to continuously look, and sometimes if we elevate and make it more of an urgency, people will open up and say, okay, we are willing to do without this stuff. And when we want to take away things, we want to make every effort that we don't take away things from the classroom which benefit the students directly, but anything we do has an impact on someone. Bottom line is we always want to make sure we take care of the needs of our student. And if it's away from the students, even in good times, we want to eliminate that cost. So answer is to reduce expenditure, increase revenue. That would be one way of doing it, and that's the most desirable way. And we need to look at where are we spending money which may be out of line. And if we identify those things, and if that's the one where we want to invest in, we're going to go for it also. And it may impact people, but we also want to look for the best way to use our resources. So if we feel like if we're spending more in a given line item compared to other school districts, and it has a significant investment alternative for us, we are going to be negotiating to look for those things also. Reducing expenditures occur through budget process. Every time when we are spending money, we are always making sure what's best for our students. The strategic plan is really the guiding pathway for us. When we talk about budget, it's just not numbers, it's an education plan, and it doesn't originate from the business office. We do the math part of it, but it's all coming from the educators in the building, it's coming from the educators supporting the educators in the building. And the business office is really providing the resources to quantify those needs. Joe did a fabulous job of identifying the life safety needs. Many communities will keep the operating tax rate low and says when you need the money, you need to be able to give a convincing argument that you need the money and why you need the money. And if we feel you have justified your request and an ask, we will approve it outside the operating tax rate just for that purpose and not more. So you could avoid a need for going and asking community for life safety renovation by increasing the permanent tax rate, and we are not recommending that. So if the O&M rate goes up, that's available to you, and chances are you may end up spending that. So this is a good restraint for the community that once you have a need for major expenditures, such as what we did for our building investments, that was a community, you had to make a argument, you have to make a convincing request, you had to have input from community, and they approved it. So that's a way of doing it. So when we are asking for the community based on the need. What is this? Okay, not okay. So one of the things is every administrator, every board member wants to make sure that we do not impact the taxpayers. Anytime there's going to be more money coming into the school district, somebody's paying for it. One of the sources we are looking for is how much money can we generate from new construction. So if you look at this amortization schedule, this essentially is a financial instrument. And by the way, if you don't see an outsider financial advisor or a vendor who makes money doing the sales pitch, we wanted to make sure our first presentation to the board is from administrators, because we want to make sure, in order for us to be honest and frank, we want to make sure it's not a sales pitch. It is identifying a need, it is making a recommendation, and then you get the professionals who are in this business who can do a much more polished presentation specifically for that stuff. But I'm very confident that we will be able to provide information to you and the community, whoever is watching on this thing. So essentially, when the Board of Education had our referendum, they made some commitments to the community that this is what our rates will be. So one of the things we always make sure is what commitments we make, we keep. So as we have gone forward after issuing the bond issue, our rates have been within the commitments we made to the community. Now, as the school district grows in terms of new construction, every year, if there is 1% new construction, which has been our history in the last few years, and I'm not sure how strong it will be, but let's assume to be 1%. In 5 years, there's additional 5% taxpayers who are sharing the same burden of what we were when we issued the bonds. So in this illustration, if you look at the second column, which is our EAV, we wanted to be more conservative and say, if our EAV did not grow at all for the next 10 years, and the only growth was from new construction of 1%. And there's a reason we said that, because we wanted to take a conservative approach and not oversell. What is our current payment schedule? And payment schedule means is what is the obligation of our taxpayers. And this is for all bonds outstanding, not just life safety bonds, proposed life safety, but existing DSAP bonds, existing building bonds for the money we borrowed for renovation. So if you look at the financial burden is in the second last column. Every year, our bondholders are being paid the money in the second last column. So for 24, which has already happened, the amount was 15,967,216. That is the obligation of our taxpayers based on the referendum. The following year, whatever the numbers are you see in that column, that's our obligation. That obligation is a fixed obligation. We have to pay our bondholders because the bonds were sold based on a commitment we made. The impact on the right-hand side is the tax rate. And if you see the tax rate going down, which is the last row, the tax rate is going down because you have new construction every year by 1%. Now, in reality, the tax rate will go down even further because EAV goes up and the payment remains constant. So the tax rate will come down on an annual basis, but the flip side of that one is the taxpayer's property of 500,000 will also be appreciating. So when we illustrate this, this equation, we wanted to make sure people don't feel, you're telling me the impact for first year, what about 5 years from now? We have kept our EAV constant. So if your EAV is growing at the same rate as the community EAV without new construction, your impact is all illustrated over here, because rising EA will create a proportional reduction in the tax rate. So this is, I would say, the most transparent illustration we can. You may have seen some illustrations which will make it lower by saying as the EAV grows on a historical basis by 2% or 3%, and the burden is less, but that aspect does not take into consideration the appreciation of property. So this I would feel is more transparent. So in terms of what, this is our current situation. This is not what we are proposing. This is our financial obligation. This is a visual illustration of what our capacity is within the existing tax rate. And we have 3 bond payments which are green, and then we have capacity to keep our same bond rate, payment rate, and be able to borrow without impacting the total tax rate of $15 million. So what we have is a different kind of a referendum bonds, and they all have payment obligations. One is the referendum debt service bond. Other one is debt service extension base, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes. And the third one is life safety. The referendum bonds is, the community just went through it a few years ago, 2018, and sold during the COVID years. By the way, that was the best time to sell the bonds. We got very good rates. And the new rates are much higher. And the debt service extension base is when the tax cap legislation was implemented in 1992-94, depending on the county. What really happened is there was some outstanding bond obligations every school district had, non-referendum. So the county, not the county, the state decided by the county that if the county has no objection, the county can get it approved, but the state automatically put a limit in terms of no growth in tax collection from existing taxpayers at CPI rate, which was on a historical basis 2.4. But several years after that, the state came up with saying is whatever your debt service obligation is, you can only get up to that amount of money, flat dollar amount. But I believe in 2006, they made it dynamic and made it inflation adjusted. So that extension base schools have used for purposes such as renovation or to take care of any expenditures which may have gone up beyond the rate of CPI. So nearly most of the school districts use that base, extension base if they can. And if you didn't get an extension base, you can even go for a referendum and get an extension base approved. Life safety, you heard about it. The state of Illinois had unlimited life safety before the tax cap. You could do it way beyond the ceiling rate if you identified a need. That's why a lot of school districts were deferring expenditures and not using expenditures to improve, and they were just going to life safety. And so the state put that under the tax cap restrictions also. Because of the restrictions and very slow growth rate in revenue from local resources and inflationary pressure, the state felt school districts really need a alternative revenue source to take care of life safety, which is paid by the local taxpayers. And if a school district can identify a need, if the Board of Education will approve that, and if all those life safety needs are approved life safety through a professional like an architect with checks and balances from the regional office as the state, that school district can sell the bonds. Obviously, that still has to be approved by the elected representative of the board. So we want to make sure that you have all the information and there is community support. So non-referendum bonds, financing options, what we were looking at was how do we do it without impacting the financial burden of the school district. The way the structure is right now, the current amortization, when I shared that with you, the financial obligation was going down slightly every year. So the question would be is if we kept the financial obligation of 15 point some million dollars, 15.9 constant, what would they do to the school district in terms of additional resources? So this is the equation. There's a lot of stuff over here. I'm sure all of this is available online also, right, after this meeting. But the key thing is, look at the last 3 or 4. Some of them we refined as we got feedback from some of our board members as to what the impact is and measure it and show it accordingly. So once again, if you look at the second column, we are not showing an appreciation property, so that's conservative. The only growth in EAV is the 1% growth. The rest is all the amortization schedule. I'll try to speed up. I think there's a message there. So the proposed, make sure you give it back to me. So the proposed debt service schedule of 15.967, what we are saying is should never go up, never be more than that. So if you look at the fourth last row, that number will never go over 15.967. Now in the previous amortization, that was coming down. So the taxpayers, yes, they are not feeling the benefit of a declining rate. What we're saying is keep that at that level. And the tax rate will still come down because of the new construction. And it will further come down with new construction and new appreciation, but we are being conservative and not even counting that, okay? So essentially the debt service for the proposed schedule remains and it comes down. And if you look at the left-hand side is for the debt service extension base, which is only for 5 years. We could have done 10 years and gotten more money for stabilizing our fund balance. If you look at the debt service extension-based numbers on the left-hand side, and if you look at the yellow highlighted numbers, that issue will give us close to about $8.3 million. That $8.3 million is not to spend more money. That money is to stabilize our fund balance so we are not going down. And this is really a multi-pronged approach. What we are saying is we want to stabilize our fund balance. We also want to be able to fund our life safety partially, but not to a very low level, but so we have alternatives. And we also want to become more efficient in our existing expenditure. And so it's a multi-pronged approach, which looks at solution from internal sources with our staff, with our programs and our leaders. We all have to look at how we're spending our resources. So impact on the taxpayers. The current expenditure allocation this year, without us asking for an issue, for existing taxpayer with a $500,000 house, for all the debt in the school district is $703. What we are saying is if we hold that $703 constant instead of it coming down, what will that do to the school district? And the estimated payments are on the right-hand side. The impact, the increase. So it's going to be $8 the first year. Yeah, it's the delta, so right now it's a decrease.
It's a decrease, right?
But that decrease will not be there if we if we do the issue. So this is like, what will the bond issue do? So it will keep it, right now it's at 703 and it's decreasing, okay? So that's the difference. So it's a decrease in payment, and we'll show that later on. But if you look at this bond issue, it takes care of keeping us stable on the left-hand side, but it only gives us $2.3 million for our $40 million life safety. How are we going to fund the remaining 37 point something? It has to impact our services, which right now we don't have an ability. Now people will say, what is that 4 million per year good for? Because that 4 million adds up to 40 million over a 10-year period. That 4 million is break fix. There are a lot of things which are not covered by life safety. There could be renovations. All the parking lots, life safety, because it happened in a private school, by the way, and life safety is not mandated for private schools. It's only for public schools. Parking lot is not in the building, so that's not covered. Stadiums, anything which is facility related, but not inside the building is not covered. And for a school district with $1.7 million worth of square footage, and if you look at the current built new price of $500 per square foot, you're talking about even 100-year amortization would be twice as, depreciation would be twice as much money as $4 million. So what we're saying is 4 million is really a relatively low number to start off with. And we want to keep that for break fix, renovation, parking lot, and other essential stuff also. So this is one option which does not give you, it solves our stability if we can become more efficient, but it doesn't give us such resources for life safety. And this is the visual aspect of it. The next one is impact of option A, 8.6 million. I think I already talked about it without sharing this with you, but we also talked about the impact. I would go to the net impact on taxpayers. The debt service portion of the tax rate would be expected to decline gradually right now. Option A, as a result of debt service, taxes would likely decrease by 7 to 10% per year on a $500. $7 to $10. Yeah, $7 to $10 per year for a $500,000 house. The next one, which can at least provide us, same thing on the left-hand side, it provides us the resources to stabilize our school district, but provides us with significantly more than the $2.3 million we were looking at from our taxations, bond issuance. Now, once again, if you see that amortization on the left-hand side is only for 5 years, that's because by choice we do not want to eliminate options for future needs, which are not identified right now. On the right-hand side, the amortization schedule is for 10 years. And the reason it's for 10 years is the 10-year life safety. We could not justify doing 20 years amortization for life safety for 10 years because that would be dishonest, because that will tie the hands for the future boards. So in this illustration, instead of saying we'll hold 15.967 constant or less than that, what we are saying is a rate before the tax cap, or not with the tax cap, before the bond issuance, proposed bond issuance is 0.443, and under no circumstances we want this to go above 0.443. So if we were to use that as a value, how much money will that be generated and what will be the impact on the taxpayers? And if you look at it, we kept, once again, the 703 constant, And it's not going to, that number is not going to change, but it will come down as the bonds get paid off, okay? So they're not getting the benefit of the reduction. This is the visual illustration. And once again, the big difference is 14.68 for life safety, and life safety needs are $40 million. This is not a option we discussed, but as we are challenging, we at least wanted to, at least the finance committee, be aware of, hey, are you going to be discussing if there was a $40 million option? We are right now not discussing that, but at least we want to make sure all information is available. We didn't do that one, right, at this stage? So we do have that number, but we didn't feel like this would be, because we have not discussed this. But as we go along, because this is a public school district, we discuss, there will be people saying are you going to be cutting any resources in the classroom? We're going to be very efficient, and we'd be very strategic to make sure we are not doing anything to impair our instruction. Some people may say why are you not looking at a solution from life safety bonds for the entirety and not use those $4 million. Right now, what we want to do is try to come up with a proposal which is the most efficient for the taxpayers also, and most friendly for the taxpayers as opposed to efficient. But the need is there. And overall, if you were to look at, it's a very efficient school district. It's a well-managed school district with fabulous outcomes for our student, and we don't want to change that equation, and we don't want to make any drastic changes.
Yes, to reiterate Mosin's point, yes, the life safety, if it's approved for the full 40 million, and the state superintendent authorized us to seek out $40 million of bonds, we could go that route. But we also recognize that there's also a priority not to negatively impact our taxpayers beyond what they're already supporting the district in terms of these bonds. And that's why we're not bringing forth an option C. From the administrative lens, we do believe option B is the most financially responsible, both in terms of for the taxpayer and for the district, out of the options that we've presented to you today. So I wanted to bring us back to those three common statements. We want to create high quality, we want to create and sustain these high quality programs, these high quality facilities, which includes life safety, and we want to have stable financial structures that allows these programs and these facilities to serve our students to the best of their abilities long beyond all of our time here. So at this time, we are ready for any questions that you might have.
All right, well, I want to thank you both because it is an overwhelming topic and it's a lot of information. And I think I mentioned to you guys that this is why committee work is so important, because we can just focus on this topic and really try to dive in and have some really quality conversations about it. And I know how much time went into preparing all this and putting it in a format so that we, not just the board members, but the community can understand. So I truly appreciate both the time and effort and the presentation tonight. That being said, I will open it up. Who would like to go? I see you pulled it close. You want to go first? Yeah, I saw it.
No, I'm just getting ready. I got my notes
I'll
up.
start here and then we'll work around. Go ahead.
Okay. If we haven't scared Gary and Kelsey off just yet, I promise it gets better. Welcome. There's some snacks over there too if you need a little fuel. So, I think I'm going to start like very big picture, right? So the board, and I'll give a little historic kind of board perspective. The board in the past intentionally, like you said, made decisions to reinvest our fund balance or taxpayer dollar into really as close as we could to our students. And that was kind of not just the referendum and the approval from the community, but the additional 21 million that the board approved in scope. I want to be clear, our budget for the referendum was on budget. We did not have any overruns, which is remarkable in a 5-year referendum project, especially with COVID and lumber prices and trades. The volatility in the market alone of construction was one that we were able to surpass while also passing on a minimal impact referendum dollar to our taxpayers. So a $160+ million referendum costs our taxpayers a $4 increase on 500,000. And those are things to also celebrate. So I just want to be clear. We were not over budget on our referendum project. The board intentionally made a decision to expand scope of 21 million, and that's how we got the new field school among another slew of advantages for our students, which we know now are of great benefit and were very, very valuable decisions. What we didn't intend, and this is where I get a little nervous, is around that $4.5 million mark of our low point. And the reason I believe, very big picture again, why we got there, even though we knew we were spending down, it was intentional, is that we have seen a significant increase in our operating expenses, especially in our services. So we've talked for years about double-digit growth in our transportation expenses, double-digit growth in the 30% repeatedly in insurance for our district. And so these circumstances are coming into conflict with our values, providing an outstanding and competitive, I would say, salary and benefit package for staff. That's a priority of the board. Maintaining our fiscal responsibility and our conservative approach, which has been a standard of the board for years when it comes to our fiduciary responsibilities and more specifically taxpayer dollar and what we are bringing in from taxpayers. So I do have a couple questions. I just wanted to put that board perspective out there so that it's clear. I mean, we're in a challenging moment. The good news is it's not terrible where we are right now, but it is an area where we have to be mindful of future decisions. We knew this was coming. We are in a place where I liked what Mohsen said. We have to stabilize because we've been on a decline financially in our fund balance overall, and that was intentional, but now we need to stabilize and start to kind of grow a little bit eventually or over time. We have to do that in the face of 40 million coming at us in health, life, safety. Increased expenses across the board. I mean, we continue to see them. And I so appreciate the administration's work and continued planned work for really looking at expenses that are out of line when compared to what other districts are paying and finding ways to bring those back in line within our budget so that those dollars become available for other things. Nobody wants to pay too much for anything. Right? I don't want to overpay for the car I buy. I don't want to overpay for the house I buy, right? So it's the same for the school district. So I'm looking forward to future work and information as you guys do your analysis of these different areas to bring those budgetary pieces back into alignment if they exist, to find out first if they exist and then to bring them back in alignment if necessary. I do have questions about the fund balance fixed expenses, because this is a little more foreign to me personally when it comes to school finance. And so my wonder is, you guys mentioned that we intentionally passed a negative deficit budget. Now, if we know those two, the 7 million is over, right? Last year was the last year, but we have 5 point whatever million that's fixed expense. What is our capacity to bring that into budget and not continue to hit what I like to call our savings account and fund balance?
That's a great way of summarizing the challenge that's before us as we go through the budget cycle, and that's why I didn't want to put numbers up.
Yeah.
Because some of it we can address right now, and some of this is bringing awareness, and so that as we live out our budget, as we live out our expenditures, we can identify those efficiencies that will really capture the savings that we need to flatten that out and make it balanced, even with that $4 million investment in capital projects and the 1.7 in capital leases.
Yeah, and not even seeing that they both have to go together right now at the same time, but when does that become a kind of a consideration for the future, right? Is like maybe we start with potentially, once we're able to stabilize a little bit, bringing that 1.7 million into the actual budget and leaving the 4, because that's been board practice of CapEx coming out of fund. But my point is, if we keep putting expenses on our fund balance and not our budget, I mean, we're at 4 million. That's really, in the grand scheme of things, not a lot of cushion. And so that's kind of one area, I think, for a multi-step potential consideration for the future, might be something to think about.
And I'm glad you brought up kind of a multi-step, because I'm glad you brought up the capital leases. Capital leases, the term has leases in it, leases have interest. So is there a potential in the future that those leases can become more of a rotating expense without actually leasing? There's a possibility that that can happen. Will that result in some savings on interest? Quite possibly, yes. We just have to have the funds in order to invest on it and on the front end, so
Right.
that we can get out of the cycle of leases.
Yes,
So you're
makes
correct.
sense.
We're looking for those efficiencies, making sure that we have the funds in order to capture those
Yeah,
efficiencies.
that makes total sense. If I can switch into the options now, really quick, unless somebody else, does anybody? Okay, all right. I don't want to occupy so much time, but I guess I will. Going into, okay, looking at the 40 million, knowing, of health, life, safety, knowing that we also have a pond of other expenditures when it comes to just educating kids. That might include renovations or other maintenance things, but also providing resources in the classroom that are going to make sure that we continue to align ourselves with our strategic plan and meet the goals of it. So we're looking now at this kind of additional 40, and you presented 2 options, option A and option B, and looking at using our current financial bond capacity to potentially bring in a partial amount to offset the 40 million over 10 years. So I thought that was great. What I think is most valuable about both options is that it has a $0 increase on the taxpayer. Am I right in saying that?
Well, when we say zero, taxpayers, when they approved the referendum when they approved the referendum last time, we promised them a certain payment schedule. So if it's a declining schedule and if they're not feeling the declining, from their perspective, it's an increase. But we're being very, very transparent. We are saying if we keep the tax rate the same, this is what the outcome is. And if we keep the payment the same, like not exceed the 15 million something, what would be the additional resources? So in terms of money coming, the charge amount to the total aggregate tax bill, 15.9 will not change in the first option. And the other one, the tax rate of today's rate is 0.443, will not change.
Right.
And if a homeowner says, well, it's 0.443 of a house, which is going to appreciate 3%, but because we have shown that as a flat value for EAV, and if my house, if I'm in Almaston, appreciates at the same rate on an aggregate basis as all the other, then the tax rate will proportionally come down also.
Tax rate will proportionately come down. Right.
So, yeah. So if there is an appreciation of 3% in the aggregate property value, and if your house is in the same aggregate value, it's going up by 3%, then the tax rate, that's how the tax caps
The
work.
tax rate will stay the same.
Then the tax rate will come down because the value goes up by 3% times. So whatever the number is multiplied,
flips.
it generates the same amount of money.
Okay, so okay, so I misspoke. Let's not talk about $0. It generates the same amount of money for the district.
So in one illustration, it collects the same amount of money for the school district, which is like 15.9.
Yeah.
And the other one it's saying is if today's rate before selling anything is 0.443, it should not go up over that.
Which would be an increase in taxes payments to the community.
Based on
For
the
10 years.
based on the promise. That's why there has to be some money coming from somewhere.
Right.
If the school district is getting money, the taxpayers paying for it.
Right.
But the taxpayers are paying based on today's rate, which they were experiencing a decline because of new construction, as well as just the amortization schedule.
So when you have up there increase, decrease in payment, and there's a dash there, that's what I'm saying is there isn't an increase or a decrease in the payment.
From this year, from last year.
From this year.
Right, from the 703, that it's staying
Right,
constant.
this year,
Right,
right.
what my taxes, what I paid this year is what I would pay next year.
Right, from this year, right. If we can go back to
But
the
how-
existing,
If you're, right, if your house is 500,000, and the other
No,
point
you're n-
is, but I think what, to your point, though, is if if these bonds were not issued, the taxes would go down.
I understand that.
no, I
If the
want
bond
everybody
was
to-
not
right.
issued, the taxes would
They'll
go
go down.
down. Districts, generally speaking, reissue bonds because of the same, everyone, they find themselves in these conundrums, right? Because it is common practice in school districts to reissue bonds.
Right.
I want to make the point that that $700 piece of the pie, the 703, is staying the same. I've paid it last year, I paid it the year before. I will continue to pay it in the future if the board supports option B. That I'm not seeing a $700
Right.
increase in my $500,000 house. I'm not seeing even a $5 increase in my tax bill. It is remaining constant.
yeah, they're not getting the benefit of a decline, let's
Right,
put it this.
right.
So if you look at the current illustration, like the current amortization schedule, that 15.967 in option A.
Yeah, and I see the
remains
debt
same.
service rate declining.
So the declining
Yeah.
thing is not being experienced. And on the right-hand side, the rate is declining. Now, the rate is declining because of new homeowners, and it will, like, this is very conservative. It will be actually a much lower tax rate because of the appreciation of property. But the appreciation of property also impacts the taxpayer. So we wanted to keep it very conservative and says if there's no new appreciation and if it's constant.
It's constant.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's from my perspective, I'm a certified financial planner.
Yeah.
When I read in the newspaper, two things which irritate me is no, there was no new tax. And when there is in good old days, people used to settle and there used to be step increase and base increase. And they would just talk about the base increase and
Right.
not the step increase. So we have always in this school district, and when I say always, I may not be in this district for too long, but I'm in the neighboring district, and I've always had the impression from friends as well as reading that Elmhurst has always been a conservative school district.
100%, yes, absolutely. It's a pillar, I think, of not just this board, but our community, is that it's
And I've worked in,
financially conservative.
and I've mostly worked in conservative school districts like Hinsdale, Naperville, and North Shore, and those are very highly educated people. You don't say things which are really incorrect because people, and I think I've always felt is if you collaborate and if you, even with the employees, if you explain what the challenges are,
Yeah.
or if you explain to the taxpayers why we are doing it, and although 80% of the people don't have children in the school system, if you educate them about the importance of school, importance of our curriculum values and all that stuff, people will support it. That's why referendums get approved. But if they don't trust you, and if you're spending money in the wrong places, I would not support,
Right.
even if I'm in education, if I feel I don't have confidence.
I think that's the challenge, I think, for the board as we continue this dialogue and thinking about what these options are, is that, you've presented options for solution. That's what I'll have to spend time thinking about is what would other options for solutions be? And I think that's the very difficult part of our current financial situation, knowing we spent down the last 4 years, need to stabilize, probably start growing a little bit. That the hard part is if it's not in this vehicle, where does it come from? And that's while maintaining the value of trying to have the least amount of impact on our students and in the classroom. So we have a lot of financial challenges ahead of us, but we have options for a pathway forward. But they're tough options to think about in a way.
And I do want to point out, because some community members who might be watching this presentation, you might be looking at it and saying, I do not pay $703 to the school district. I pay much more than that. We are talking about the debt service portion of their property taxes to the school district. So what we are saying under option B is that if that tax rate were to stay the same, that debt service payment would remain relatively the same.
I just wanted to reiterate one thing that you were saying, Athena, and one thing that you had mentioned before about working very efficiently. And, you know, when our administration is looking at solutions for challenges or implementing programs and resources, they're always looking at how is this going to impact us financially? Is there something else that we're using that is doing the same thing? And can we get rid of this? And, you know, maybe not just hiring to fill a position that's vacant, but really looking at the whole system to decide, is this how we want to fill this position? And is this the right way to use these resources of people in our district? And so I think the challenge here is when you run a school district efficiently, it's not as easy to go through and find, you know, this large amount of money that you might need for these life safety bonds or life safety needs. And I think that's a good and challenging thing because running an efficient school district is really good and important, but it also makes it more difficult than to find the resources when you need to do that. So I think that's where that challenge that Athena is speaking to and that you were talking about, Joe, comes in.
And I do want to highlight in this option B, you can see on that net impact on operating funds, and we referenced the $4 million transfer is part of operating funds because it's an annual transfer from our budget. Under option B, even with approximately $1.5 million every year coming from option B life safety bonds, we would still need to invest about $2.5 million of that $4 million transfer for just the life safety items on average per year. And that leaves us with $1.5 million to address all of those other things that are not life safety items that we need in order to make sure our classroom environments are conducive to learning and do what we need them to do so that students are college and career ready.
And if you look at that $1.5 million divided by 1.7 million square feet, that's less than $1 per square foot. And if you were to look at your home, it's like if your home is 3,000 square feet, you got 9,000 students coming in every day. So the maintenance, repair, wear and tear is always going to be there. And I know that's in addition to the life safety we're already doing, but the number of 4 million is a relatively conservative number for our size school district. So we don't have much capacity. We always have to be more efficient, and we'll be looking for ways to become more efficient also.
Go ahead, Kelly.
Did you say earlier, way earlier, and maybe I'm just not thinking right, but did you say there was, like this past summer, for example, money left from the 4 million for the summer capital projects?
Well, what happens is when Joe was talking about revenue and expenditure, like $3 million more, we, as financial planners, when we're doing the budget, we don't want to overestimate. We rather be conservative on revenue, because last thing you want to do is come to the board meeting and end of the year and says, oh, we overspent and we under project. So we'd rather have, so if you have like a 168 million, 1% growth in revenue is 1.6 or $1.7 million. Same thing in the expenditure. It was like 1.5%. And that is like what Joe said, in education, we don't encourage people to spend just because it's in the budget.
Sure, no, of course. I was just curious how often. Yeah, and for summer, so like if you're saying we would only be able to spend the 2.5 million per summer, would that really impact our projects if we're kind of always coming back with money for funds left?
I
feel
think
like
you're bringing up the good point. And Joe probably knows this better than I do, sorry. From memory, the last 3-4 summers, the 4 million has been the 4 million spent. I think you're presenting another challenge that we still, with these options, are reducing capital basically to 1.5 for those things,
But can I
right?
just-
Even though we included some of those in the past.
Well, can I just clarify on this, or somebody clarify it for me? Because one of my questions is even the impact of option A or option B. You know, you told us that priority one, so within a year, is $300,000. So why are you saying, you know, that in option A, you would say projects need to support approximately 3.7 million, therefore we'd only have 250,000 for the other stuff. And in option B, you're saying, you know, we'd only have 1.5 million. Like, year one, that's not the case. And, you know, remember, A's and B's are the only mandatories, right? So I feel like it feels misleading to me, or I'm misunderstanding why you're saying year one, we would only have 250 and we'd have to spend 3.75 million of those 4 million on life safety.
That's absolutely a fair question. The way that we calculated it is if it's $40 million over the course of 10 years, we assumed it over an equal amount over those 10 years. So an average of 4 million. Even though we only have to take care of 300,000 this first year, if we have $40 million worth of projects, we don't want to do 300,000 the first year, and then by the time we get to year 9, we're spending,
Sure.
7 million.
Thank you for explaining that. So then I would just feel that, again, A's and B's are the only mandatory ones, right? And like a lot of the things we're going to have to decide over the next few years, there's going to be things we might not be able to do. So C's kind of fall into that list, in my opinion. If we're talking about making our fund balances stronger and making our budgets stronger, then I feel like we are going to have to make those choices to not do certain things. So I feel like it's I feel like we're being boxed into option A, or we're being kind of not boxed into, I don't mean to say you're manipulating, please. I don't want to, I'm saying it poorly, but I don't think it's fair to say that year one, we'd only have $250,000 to put to other projects. And you know, so that's all I'm trying to say, because this screen kind of makes me feel that way. Like, you know, we couldn't do 3.75 million year one because we wouldn't get through A's and B's, and therefore we couldn't do the C's. You know what I mean? So to me, this seems a little, I don't know, in my mind, at least the way I'm interpreting it, it's a little misleading for me, because I feel like there would be additional funds available to get through those normal summer capital projects. I mean, we're going to have to make decisions about, you know, like, I love the creativity of trying to find out how to get that 1.7 in the leases out of the fund balance and into the budget, things like that. I love the idea of the electricity and finding ways to save money. I mean, are there grants out there that we could get to help make that change? I get you have to spend money to save money and things like that, but I feel like, for me, until we can see where we can cut the fat, and I agree with Beth wholeheartedly, we are efficient, and so there's not going to be. But I think, Joe, or most of it might have been you, let's ask our buildings, what can you cut? If you have to cut, what can you cut? I mean, because they're the ones in those buildings, and they know better than us. So I feel like until we, as a board, and this is my opinion only, can hear about where we are saving money and where we're making cuts and where we can find ways to make these things happen, I am hesitant to ask for, and I know it's keeping the tax rate the same, but it would be an increase over what we had promised the community leading up to this year. So they would be paying more than they anticipated. So I get it's no tax rate increase on option B, understand that, and it's no payment increase on the option A, which I appreciate you distinguishing between the two, because I think that's really important way to look at it. So that's really what I want to hear about, and I hope in August, when we get the presentation, we'll hear about some of those things. Because I think, like you said, Mohsen, to get the community behind us, to get them to understand and support this, I think we have to show that it hurt, like what's compromise? Everybody's hurt. You give, I give, everybody's not really happy, everybody has a little pain, and that's what compromise is. I feel like we have to show that it's painful for us too, my opinion.
And I feel like, thank you, Mrs. Troutman and Mrs. Assif, because I think both of you have laid the groundwork for a great commercial for everyone should be tuning in on September 10th. When we talk about some of those opportunities, those efficiencies that we are finding that's going to work itself in either to this tentative budget or will affect future budgets. Right now, we have a tentative budget that we have to bring forward, but for instance, energy savings is one that we're going to be talking about on September 10th. That's going to take a little bit of time, so we might not realize it right up front, but it is something we're very excited about the prospects for.
And I do want to point out, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I do want to point out, in the last 10 years, because of how conservative we are, we have always predicted a deficit budget. And we've never had one, other than the COVID year when we abated and gave money back to the community. That is the only deficit budget we have had, right? But we always predict one, and we always get nervous. And I'm not saying we shouldn't make some really strong, smart decisions moving forward. But I also think, because of how conservative we are, and because we no longer have those $7 million payments coming out of our fund balance like we have for the last 3 years, I want to understand it better, and it sounds like in September we will.
Absolutely. And we're also going to be talking about where did we land with our expenses related to our summer capital projects. So are there additional funds? Because ideally, those funds would then be used to support future summer capital projects.
Okay, just
Yeah.
really quick. So
Yeah, no, take
I
your time.
appreciate what you're saying, and I totally hear what you're saying, and I agree a lot of what you're saying. I would say, in addition to that, though, we had talked at the beginning about how A's and C's could turn into A's and B's, right? So we have to recognize that there are some C's out there that are probably going to be A's and B's at some point. We also know that the total amount is $40 million, and we're talking about 14. So we're still significantly off from accomplishing all the C's. So for me, it's hard to say that $14 million, that the C's that need to be done for sure are probably, it could be $14 million worth, right? We're still saying there's $26 million that we may not be able to accomplish. So I think for me, it would help to know a little bit more about what the C's are, right? Because it's hard to say like, oh, well, maybe we don't need to do all those. We might need to do some of them. And so I'm just saying 14 is still very conservative. We're talking 26 million we're not covering, and that could be an opportunity for us to look through the Cs and say, this one maybe not so important, this one is very important. So I think
that ties back-
identifying is important, is all I'm
And
saying.
I completely agree. And I think that ties back to what we talked about before. How many Cs from the last 10-year cycle are now As or Bs, right? Like, so, and we can only look at the past to kind of give us a roadmap for what we can expect. So I think, no, it's an incredibly valid point.
And I
So- oh.
also sorry, just one thing tying into that, but like the things when we're looking at like where we can cut back and I love energy because I don't feel like that's going to directly impact our students. So just being very cautious and mindful of finding areas that are not going to have a direct impact on the work we're doing with students and supporting all of our students across the district. That's just, I know it's really important to all of us, but just want to reiterate that too.
I just quickly wanted to add on to what Kelly said that, I'm sure, I don't know if you can like look at this or how to determine this, but if, Cs could be less expensive now in year 2 or whatever than it would be, because if it does become an issue or like, even if it's like exactly what you're saying, if it's not mandatory now, we still may need to do it, but it might be more expensive in the future. I'm sure some could remain the same, but I just think looking at that and maybe seeing when it would be the most optimal time to take care of it would be good as well.
If we had that flexibility, Cs can't be touched until As and Bs are
Right.
done. So you're talking As and Bs are in the first 5 years. Cs are in the last 5 years. You have an annual review of auditors coming in to see the progress you're making in your 10-year plan. It is flexible. It's a work in progress. So some things may move from year to year, depending on what the state board or regional board dictates, right? So we don't have that kind of flexibility. The other thing I just want to point out, and it's been mentioned a couple times, so that's why I'm pointing it out. I'm not sure that we're talking about a promise we've made to the community. I've been a board member for 5 years, and I don't know what that means. So the promise I've made to the community is to be financially responsible, and I, by nature, am fiscally conservative. And so when I see options, because $40 million is a lot of money for the district to take on, given, or even over 10 years, given where we are currently in our financial position, I don't see that as feasible. Even if you went to every school and asked them, where can we pinch, I don't see that adding up to $40 million in 10 years. And so this opportunity that we have, which is very common in school districts when bonds roll and that they are commonly replaced with the next set of bonds, knowing that the impact on the taxpayer is their tax bill is the same as it was last year. It's not an increase in taxes. It's their bill, not hypothetically, their bill stays the same based on their EAV and all these other factors, but we're not imposing an additional, as you do in a referendum or anything, from what they currently have. We're keeping the bond sale the same, right? The bond sale the same. The dollar, the 443, the tax rate. So the debt service tax rate, that's what I'm trying to say. Am So I know I'm all over the place because I'm confused now. But that's where I'm at, is around, and I have to think more about this because I am also interested in hearing more about, and I think we've outlined some opportunities through our board meetings and discussions for expense control, I would say, because we know that we've seen increases in areas that other districts haven't seen in the same capacity. They haven't seen 38% increases in their insurance costs and things like that. So we've outlined those things as a board. I believe that the administration is aware of where those opportunities may lie, and it takes a longer pathway to really come to fruition. And I'm worried that if we're going to wait to see what the options are for cost savings, we're missing out on an opportunity on a bond sale that's actually going to help us take the edge off of a $40 million obligation. I also don't want to get into the practice that I've heard within our community and prior to really any of us being on the board, is that in the past, some of these projects were put on hold, which didn't bode well for schools that we had to rebuild in the last 5 years, and didn't bode well for education. They were not very attractive learning environments for our kids, let's be honest. It's why we had to go to referendum. So I wouldn't be interested in, I am interested in pacing out and making financial decisions that make sense, that balance all of our core values, including taxpayer, a conservative approach to our tax body and our constituency. I think our taxpayers, our residents expect that from me as a board member. And I'm happy to do that. And I think, so what I'm getting at is, I think we have to strongly consider an option to take the edge off. We are not increasing the tax bill. We are saying the debt service stays the same. And that is actually a really positive thing when you're in the financial position that we're in right now, knowing what's coming and knowing what our services and expenses increases have been over the course of the last 4 years and the compounding increases that we've seen. So that's where I'm kind of like, I'm hearing our discussion. I think it's such a great discussion. I love having these conversations in committee. I want to make sure that the picture as we go forward, and I know you guys are working on this and doing the good work, is a complete picture as much as it can be, even though we have to make some assumptions that it can be as complete. So I think there's a lot of positivity that comes with the health, life, safety and that 10-year plan, and now we have a focus, something that I think we maybe as a board have felt, and I don't want to speak for all of us, that we need a little more information or knowledge on. I like that aspect of it, but then also, how do you balance that with where we are financially and the growing needs of our kids? You know, that's the crux, and it's a challenging position for us to be in as board members, absolutely, hands down. Sorry, I'll stop talking now. Thank you.
And I do want to, forgive me, but I do want to assure the board that, and I'm going to skip to timeline right here. We have to affirm the life safety report before we can even have this discussion about bonds. So at the same time, we will be bringing a preliminary budget to you. So it will address what is that? What does that look like that we are addressing some of those other budgetary impacts that can make sure that this is sustainable at the same time. And then after making that decision, those are those next steps of looking at the bonds and determining the amounts and setting all those rates. Those all happen after adopting the budget, just because of the timing of affirming our life safety survey.
And I think we do have another finance committee meeting before we have to adopt the budget, correct?
Correct,
Beginning of
September
September.
10th.
So there will be another opportunity to
10th.
kind of have this discussion to see where we're at.
Yes,
Because we'll have affirmed the life safety survey work already.
correct.
And to piggyback
One-
on,
Hold on one second. Let us just-
Sorry. Okay, one last question. I can't promise that. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. But for benefit of just my recollection, and I also think community members and even our two community members who have joined us, what is common practice in terms of how much money we have in the bank? I mean, because for a lot of people, you probably hear $4.5 million, or at the high point,
This
40
policy
plus
needs to be
million dollars.
reviewed under the policy committee. It's actually it's up for review, and it changes, but the
Okay.
policy committee decides what that percentage of your budget is that will be in the fund balance.
And what is it currently?
Yeah, but I want to piggyback on what Nikki's saying. I also want to know not just what the policy says, but what the consultants recommend as far as healthy fund balance. I think that's what you're asking more about. Our fund balance policy right now says 15 to 20%.
Yeah, because I think when you say 4.5 million at a low point, that could mean, for many people, they have no idea if that's good, bad, indifferent, so I'm just curious, like, what is?
so let me when we talked about 1920, at that time, not touching money for early taxes like what we're doing now, we had at least at that time 10%.
10%.
Which meant is we funded full month of May, we funded full month of June, and we still had 10% left. Many conservative school districts, and I'm using conservative because I know that they exclude the early taxes from fund balance, and they want anywhere from 10 to 20%, not counting the early taxes. If you're counting early taxes, even if right now we were at 24.3 at this number, and when you're looking at that 4 point some million dollars, a lot of that money is restricted. You cannot use Social Security money and IMRF money to pay for education, or none of the funds can be automatically done, only with board action, which usually goes 1 month ahead, and we don't really know where we will be. And then also, you cannot transfer even with board action restrictive fund balances. We don't touch debt service because that's bondholders' money. We cannot even with board action touch IMRF and FICA because that's a very specific levy. So this, from my perspective, is we were spending a lot of time every pay period and every bill-less period measuring if we need to borrow the money, because the very first week when I started here, I got a call from PMA's cash management people saying you may want to be prepared for some borrowing options. And last thing I want to do is start working on the borrowing options. So we were monitoring it because I was very confident that the cash flow is really not the exact model to find out what it is, because historically the state has always been late in making payments. So the cash flow was very careful not to count every single payments. Evidence-based funding, which is the largest, we were counting, but sometimes payment for transportation has been delayed like 6 months. So they didn't count some of the payments for transportation as money which will be there for sure for investment purpose.
So Mohsen, going back to the question of what is from your professional expertise, your recommendation, just give me that percentage.
I would say 35%,
Thank
really.
you.
35% of our
And
budget, which is.
35%
remind me
of
again.
your, the state says revenue, but I say expenditure because
Okay.
expended, both of them go up every year. So that 35% has to be a number. The dollar amount goes up because it's 35% of your dynamic expenditure,
Of your expenditure.
which means is you always have to be balanced and building surpluses.
And this year's unaudited results have us at 24.6% as of June 30th.
Got it, okay, thank you.
Yeah, and so this is a great point to pick out, and the new policy chair will address this in the policy committee meetings, but, just how, and I did want to throw this out there, when you pointed out in that fund balance, or was it the fund balance chart, about how you included the money from after May 31st, just to make sure that it was, apples to apples, right? So our policy right now for the fund balance, 15 to 20%?
It says 15 to 20%.
But that is based on the old accounting methods.
Right.
And the reason these numbers with the asterisks are reflected, and that's why Joe pointed it out, is because those are the years that we were using the old accounting methods.
Yes.
Which we no longer use. But so that 15 to 20% policy was in place during those years. And that's why the fund balance policy needs to be adopted to reflect our new accounting. And so when Mohsen says conservatively it should be 35%, it's not that we don't agree, it's just that the policy is reflective of the old accounting methods. I
Right.
just want to make sure that's clear for everybody, because when you hear that we're at 15% or 10%, or, it's not that we're disagreeing with your assessment of 35%, it's just that the policy reflects our old accounting methods. So, is that?
And the old accounting would be like 44% for the early taxes, and then 15%. So that
Right.
would be like 60% in that sense.
Right.
Right. And
So
that-
what
right.
we'll be looking to do in policy is to chalk through and get our recommendations from Elizabeth Mohsen, our consultants and advisors around, given our financial landscape, our revenues, expenses, how much should we, right? And it goes back to how the state is recognizing our fiscal solvency and responsibility, right? How much should we aim towards having in fund balance on June 30th, given this way that we are now continuing on, moving forward in our accounting methods, to not look at, to not divert, hold off on the June payments till July. So whatever that word was that we use often that I can't think of, because this meeting is 2.5 hours in, so. But yeah, so thanks for that, and that will be a review at a later date. So is it safe to say then our next steps here are, we have a meeting at the board meeting to discuss and potentially approve or deny the request to go to the state for health, life, safety. And then after that, we have a finance meeting where we will talk again about budget as well as this, if approved by the state.
We're just
Well-
affirming what the report is at
Yes.
the
Right.
August 19th.
Right.
Then you're
Correct.
going to submit it to the state.
Yes, we
Right.
have an
So we're not
obligation to either affirm or we can contest elements of the life safety
I feel
report.
like
That
Brent's going to need
delays,
a name tag before that.
that delays the whole process, and then we would not be able to move forward with any life safety work until we've gone back through that process
Okay,
with
1 through
White.
7.
And it would, yes, severely
So the
hamper
target
our
is the
progress.
August date to approve the, yeah,
Correct.
okay.
Kelly?
I have a super quick question, just clarifying question. So when we're saying that As and Bs have to be done before Cs, that's if we're using the life safety bonds. We can choose to do a capital project and do category C items if we want, it just can't come out of the life safety bonds. I just want to make sure I understand that.
If you don't have the resources, you can use any
if you have the resources. Is that what you said?
No, what I'm saying is those things have to be done either way. Let's say the board decided not to issue the bonds. The life safety work needs to still get done, so.
Right. I'm saying for, let's say, we know that in order to use our life safety bonds, we have to take care of A, then we have to take care of B before we can take care of C.
Right.
I'm saying if there's something on C that we want to take care of while we're still taking care of A and B, we can use our capital, like summer capital, to do
So
that.
I-
That's what
I
I'm
don't
just trying to
think-
clarify.
I
that.
don't think the issuance of bonds ties into the
Right.
ABC. I think the state says, here's the stuff you have to do. They don't care
Okay.
how we pay for it.
Okay.
It's just that, now, if we did, in my understanding, if we did all the As and Bs in year one, then we could take 9 years to do the Cs. Correct? Right, like, so, but could we also, I think is what Kelly's asking, could we do a C in year 2?
If we have the funds, you're saying.
So I want to address a couple of things. First of all, the language in the life safety process specifically says you cannot embark on any work in category C until As and Bs. They don't talk about funding source.
Right.
So
The money
it
has
is
nothing
my
to do-
interpretation is that we couldn't say, oh, we're just going to use our other funds for that. We're going to take care of it.
Well, and remember,
wrong,
it's
so
a
thank you.
priority list. The
Right.
things are in C because they have more life. Why would we decide, if we don't have all this extra money laying around, why
Right.
would we decide to move them up? Like, it's.
I think it'd be helpful just to know what the C items are. I think that will help me understand, you know, all of
Let me give
us.
you an example of a C item that shows up in several schools. It is replacement of windows. It's not a safety risk. Students aren't going to fall out of our current windows or anything. It is more of a, this is going to create, well, it creates energy efficiency. That's actually one of the pillars that can be used for life safety. And that, in effect, then has savings on our operating funds if we can replace those windows. I also want to address, you did mention, I think it was Mrs. Troutman, you mentioned, we can do all the As and Bs in that first year, and boom, we're onto the Cs in the second year. A lot of districts complete their As and Bs within the first couple of years, so that way they can progress into, okay, now let's look at the funds that are available and what are those C items that we think are going to have the biggest impact, whether that's energy savings or security as a top issue. What are those items that are on top of our priority list?
And, yeah, I think that's a great point, because I would be interested to know, we know $300,000 are the As. I'd like to know what the B total is. Because, oh, 6 million?
Yes, don't quote me on
Oh,
that.
that's right, yeah,
But
yeah.
I will provide that full
Yeah,
spreadsheet for
yeah.
you.
Right.
And I know we've been talking about life safety. I don't want us to lose opportunity for stabilization of fund. And all of this have timelines. And the reason I say timeline means is we need to be able to sell the bonds so this way we can have the resources before next May. And in order for that to happen, it needs to happen sometimes in October. So we need to plan for that. It's like not 6 months, 60 days to 90 days process.
Okay. Any more questions? I know it's a lot. Do you guys, anything? Okay. No, Kelsey, yay.
I have one question. I think it was on your budget comparison slide from last year. I was just curious about the difference between the 12 million, I think it was the net change, and the 7 that actualized. So is that all actual savings, or is it more timing? Like there's things we didn't get to? Yeah, a lot of it was in that educational bucket. I was just curious what makes that up, and is some of that then rolling into this upcoming year?
Yes, that's a very fair point. So as I mentioned at the very beginning of how do we perform budget-wise, this is capturing the $3 million of revenue and the $2 million less of expenditures. And you are very astute in noticing, once this moves forward, that we were budgeting a $5.1 million deficit in the education fund, and we only ended up with a $794,000 deficit in the educational fund. So you can gather from that, a lot of the revenue and a lot of the expenditure savings happened in the education fund.
What's included in that again?
The education fund is everything that we do to directly impact instruction. So most of our salaries exist right there. Building budgets, learning and teaching budgets, technology, all of those things exist in the education fund. The education fund by far has the largest fund balance as well in every school district in Illinois.
And without looking at the detail of accounts, we can tell you that the interest earnings were much higher than anticipated because the external market changed. Same thing, I would say property tax, because education fund is the largest fund for tax purpose. If the tax collections were better, the new construction was better. The district generated more resources. In the last 5 years, if you were to look at when we talked about not going south, last 5 years were the best for education funding in terms of money from federal sources, state sources, and local sources is all CPI, but very fortunate that we have very solid tax base. But the state and federal government is pulling back. So most of the burden falls on the local taxpayers.
Okay. Any more questions or comments? Come on, no? No, absolutely, go.
Might as well keep this going. I do want to say thank you both for putting this together. I know it takes a lot of work to get this going, and thank you for your honesty and openness. And I just wanted to go over it. You said CPI on average goes up 2.2% yearly for the most part.
2.5 would be
2.5.
more if you were to look from going forward, we are looking at. Going forward, we are projecting around 2.2.
Okay.
But if you were to look the history, it's close to about 2.5 from 1994 or so.
But we have transportation going up at a higher rate than that, energy costs going up at a higher rate, inflation going up at a higher rate, insurance rates going up at a higher rate, and then the interest that we borrow goes up at a higher rate. Then we've got the interest rates that we are gaining are going down, federal state funding going down, and now we have life safety expenditures that we have to put together. So I just want to kind of put all that in perspective here, and we're saying, I tried to do a little bit of math here for the $500,000 house. We are asking the taxpayers to pay about $88 per year extra, even though it's not, it's staying the same in what they pay over the next 10 years. It's still an extra $88 from what they would be paying over a $500,000 house, and that will give the district approximately $12.3 million more. So I was just trying to break down the differences of what they would owe if they're paying $703 as opposed to what they would pay if we didn't up the bond on option B, I should say.
You're saying compared to the current debt
Yes.
payment schedule versus
Versus what
an
option B
option
would be. Yeah, I should have clarified, sorry. But that would give the district about $12.3 million to kind of cover some of those costs for future costs that we kind of see are rising exponentially.
Correct. I think
Okay.
that's an adequate.
Well, that's, I just wanted to clarify the dollar amount so that
And
kind
you're
of we
saying
understand
$88 cumulative over those years, or
per
you saying
year,
per
over
year?
about 10
Per
years.
year, I'll verify that.
About $900 total for over 10 years on $500,000 house. Yeah. Just, it's better, it's easier, I think, for me to think like, what am I going to pay more as a taxpayer on this, right? Just to clarify.
Yeah, and I think it's a better way, actually, to look at it. Like, we're not, like you say, it's not costing you anymore. Right. It's still the 703.
But it is.
What's happening is you're not saving money like it was supposed to happen if we didn't issue these bonds. Fair?
Yeah.
And I'll defer to your math.
Didn't reissue the bonds,
Right,
yes.
Right, so
Yeah.
I think it's a great perspective, like to twist it the other way, is saying, it's not costing you more, you're just not saving the money that you would have saved if we didn't issue the bonds. The $88 on a $500,000 house for the next 10 years.
Yeah, I'd be worried about putting a number out there
Well,
if it's
whatever.
not coming from the actuals. But yes, in concept,
100.
when you don't renew the bond,
Right.
in concept, the tax bill would go down, absolutely. It's common practice that bonds continue. That's what I'm saying, is that for school districts who have fixed revenue streams, it is common practice to renew bonds because they find themselves not in a financial position to be able to release that revenue. And that's the position we're in right now, is my analysis of our conversation tonight.
And I'm also focusing on what Brian is saying about the consumer inflation basket for school. We talk about CPI, that's a national CPI for everything. The education basket is different. And with most of our expenditures in salaries and benefit, especially the insurance has really nationally been out of line. I mean, everywhere it's going up at double digits.
Well, I think that's a perfect segue when talking about how much insurance is costing us and going up double digits to lead into our last presentation. Oh, shoot. There's a PowerPoint, so there's.
This is going to be very brief, however, because we are embarking on the journey of our next insurance renewal. And so this meeting is before we've embarked on that journey. But I do want to raise awareness for everybody here at this table on our insurance fund and how it's structured and the elements that impact our overall insurance fund health. So just to give some background, we have our own self-insured program. And what that means is that we manage both the plan design and we also manage all the finances of it. So whatever design we create, we are responsible for all the expenditures that go along with that. And the funding mechanism is through employee and employer contributions. And those are part of our collective bargaining agreements with our unions, as well as offered to all of our non-union staff as well. It's important to note that there's three drivers on what impacts our insurance fund. And every month you do get a report on the health of our self-insured program. That is in the board reports under financial reports, so you can see the trajectory of our insurance fund. But really, these three things are the things that can either positively or negatively affect that fund balance. Right now, it is in the negatives, and that's something that our insurance committee, of which Mrs. Arvanites is on, Dr. Henry is on, I am on, as well as a couple other administrative representatives and members of our three collective bargaining units. We engage in the conversation about plan design because our responsibility is to come with recommendations to the school board on this is what we believe the plan design that will meet the needs of both the financial end and of the benefits that we provide to our employees. So the premiums have an impact on whether how sustainable our insurance fund is, but also that plan design. And then the third leg that is often forgotten about is just the overall performance of the plan. Every individual and every organization ebbs and flows through performance highs and performance lows. But also as part of that is the behaviors of using the plan. And that's part of the education we want to provide to our staff as well. And that's part of the responsibility of that insurance committee. Are we utilizing the plan in a way that is financially efficient for the district and still provides the benefits in the same way? So for instance, you go get your MRI at a location that's in network versus out of network is a simple way that it saves the plan money, and oftentimes it saves the individual money, and they get the same results. So it's very important to point out all three of these things. That's part of the conversation that we as an insurance committee have, and those are the drivers that impact the overall health of our insurance fund. And that is the end of the report on the insurance fund.
And I think
I'll
we
just,
have,
yeah, I'll just jump in as representatives. Thanks for pointing out that Dr. Henry and I are on the insurance committee, and really a nice group of people who come in from different perspectives with different experiences, trying to tackle the challenges that come with what we've been experiencing recently with insurance. So happy to report to the board that we are meeting this week with the insurance committee. That's our next step. Hope to have a fruitful dialogue, I'm sure, about everything that Joe just outlined for us. And, hoping to, we're going into this season of an open enrollment, so hopefully those recommendations that are coming to the board balance all of the things that Joe just outlined for us, needs of all people around the room. So, and again, I just want to reiterate, Dr. Henry and I know that directive of the board is that we manage and maintain our fiscal responsibility while balancing our ability to offer high-quality benefits to our team, or to our staff, sorry. So that's kind of the framework that we go in with, and knowing that we have a responsibility, a fiduciary responsibility too, but maintaining services. So thank you. Dr. Henry, anything to add? All right. So you guys will hear more about that after we meet.
Any questions, comments? All right, you survived, Joe. The board has the following upcoming meetings: August 19th, 2025, a regular Board of Education meeting at 7 o'clock right here in District 205, and then a Finance and Operations Committee meeting September 10th at 5:30 p.m., once again, right here at District 205. With that, the meeting is adjourned at 7:47 p.m.